Something just happened that is going to change what you thought you knew about your rights. On May 14th, 2025, the Supreme Court of the United States issued a 6-3 emergency ruling that sent shockwaves through every corner of this country. 6 justices voted one way, 3 justices dissented, and the legal landscape of America shifted in a matter of hours. If you do not know exactly what happened, why it matters, and what it means for you personally, then what I am about to share is absolutely critical for you to understand. This is not an exaggeration. This is a real, documented, legally binding ruling from the highest court in the land that went into effect almost immediately. The dangerous part is that most Americans have no idea it happened, no idea what it changes, and no idea what they might be walking into blind. That is exactly why you are here right now. That is why I need you to stay until the very end of this video. What you learn in the next few minutes could be the difference between knowing your rights and accidentally losing them. Let me be very clear. I am not here to tell you how to feel about this ruling. I am not here to push a political agenda. What I am here to do is make sure you understand exactly what happened, what it means in simple terms, and what you might need to do differently going forward. That is my only job today. If you care about knowing where you stand legally, if you care about protecting yourself and your family, pay close attention. The first thing you need to understand is what makes this ruling different from the hundreds of other decisions the Supreme Court makes every year. The key word here is emergency. When the Supreme Court issues an emergency ruling, it means the situation was considered so urgent that the normal timeline was bypassed entirely. Normally, cases take months or even years. There are hearings, written arguments, deliberations, and then a formal ruling. But when an emergency ruling is issued, the court is essentially saying we cannot wait for the normal process. We need to make a decision right now. That alone tells you something serious was happening that demanded immediate action. In this case, the ruling was 6-3, which is a significant majority but not a unanimous decision. That split is important because it tells you there was real disagreement among the justices. This was not a close call. 6 justices saw the situation one way, and 3 justices saw it very differently. When you have a 6-3 decision on an emergency basis, it means the majority felt the urgency strongly enough to act quickly, but the minority felt strongly enough to disagree publicly. That tension is worth paying attention to because it means the legal questions involved are not simple or settled. If this video is helping you understand something important, I ask you to take a quick moment to like it. That simple action helps more people find this information, and there are plenty of others who need to hear exactly what just happened on May 14th. So what did the court actually rule on? Without getting into too much legal complexity, the court addressed an executive action involving what is called administrative authority. This is essentially the question of how much power the executive branch has to make decisions without going through Congress first. This sounds abstract, but it has very concrete implications for every American. Every time a president issues an executive order, every time a federal agency creates a new regulation, every time a government department changes its enforcement priorities, that is administrative authority in action. And the Supreme Court just made a major ruling about where those boundaries sit. What makes this particularly striking is the timing. May 14 came at a moment when the country was already divided on multiple major issues. Immigration was a flashpoint. Economic uncertainty was creating anxiety. People were already questioning whether the federal government was overreaching in some areas and not acting aggressively enough in others. Into that environment, the court dropped this emergency ruling, and almost immediately, legal analysts started warning that the implications could reach far beyond the specific case being decided. This is what nobody tells you when these rulings come out. The immediate case is just the surface. Beneath it is a shift in legal precedent that can reshape entire areas of law for years or even decades to come. The dangerous part about rulings like this is that the actual legal language is dense, complicated, and buried in documents that most people will never read. Attorneys spend years learning how to interpret this language, and even they disagree constantly. For an ordinary person, trying to read the actual ruling is like trying to read a foreign language without a dictionary. But here is what you can understand without a law degree. The Supreme Court essentially validated the authority of the executive branch to act in ways that previously might have been challenged successfully in lower courts. The majority said that when the executive branch makes decisions in urgent situations, those decisions carry more weight than courts might have granted them in the past. That is a major shift because it means the government has more room to move quickly, and challenging those moves becomes harder. Think about what that means in practical terms. Imagine you are dealing with a federal agency that has made a decision affecting your business, your benefits, your immigration status, or your property rights. Under the old interpretation, you might have been able to challenge that decision in court and get it reversed relatively quickly. But under this new ruling, if the agency declares the situation urgent, the courts may be required to give more deference to the agency's interpretation. You might still win eventually, but the process just became longer, harder, and more expensive. And in the meantime, your business might be shut down or severely damaged. That is not a theoretical scenario. That is the real-world consequence of what the court decided on May 14th. I want to be fair and balanced here because that is what responsible reporting demands. Supporters of the ruling argue that when genuine emergencies arise, the government needs to be able to act quickly without being tied up in endless litigation. They say that slow responses to urgent problems can cause real harm to real people, and that judges should respect the expertise of executive agencies in their specific domains. That is a reasonable position with a long history in American administrative law. On the other side, critics argue that giving the executive branch too much deference creates a pathway to abuse of power. They warn that what begins as a response to genuine emergencies can become a convenient excuse for overreach. They point out that the phrase urgent situation can be defined very broadly, and that once courts routinely defer to executive claims of urgency, the checks and balances that are supposed to protect citizens start to weaken. That is also a reasonable position, and it is the one expressed by the 3 dissenting justices who made their disagreement part of the official record. Both perspectives have merit, and both are worth taking seriously. The point of this video is not to tell you which perspective is correct. The point is to make sure you understand that this ruling happened, that it is real, and that it changes the legal environment you are living in, whether you realize it or not. If you want to make sure you stay informed about developments like this, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Hitting subscribe takes just a second, and it ensures you will not miss the next critical update when it happens. The same logic applies to immigration situations, tax disputes, benefit denials, property seizures, and dozens of other areas where the federal government has power over ordinary people. Every single one of those areas now has a slightly different legal landscape than it did before May 14th. That does not mean the world is ending. It means the rules have changed, and if you do not know the new rules, you could accidentally walk into situations that are much harder to get out of. Here is what happens next. In the coming weeks and months, you are going to start seeing news stories and social media posts about this ruling and its implications. Some will be accurate, some will be exaggerated, some will be deliberately misleading for political purposes. And that is exactly why you need to understand the underlying reality for yourself, rather than relying on whatever headline happens to catch your attention. With this knowledge, you can evaluate what you are hearing, separate the signal from the noise, and make better decisions about how to protect yourself. The court did not issue this ruling in a vacuum. The 6-3 split reflects the ideological composition of the current court, and legal experts on all sides are already analyzing what this means for future cases. There will almost certainly be follow-up rulings that refine and clarify what was decided on May 14th. There will be lower court cases that apply the new standard to specific situations. The story is not over. It is just beginning. Here is what most people miss. The real danger is not the ruling itself. The real danger is the gap between what the ruling says and what ordinary people understand about it. That gap is where confusion lives. That gap is where mistakes happen. That gap is where people lose rights they did not even know they had. The more you understand about what actually happened and why it matters, the better positioned you are to navigate whatever comes next. If you find this information useful, please share this video with someone you know who might also benefit from understanding what happened. This is exactly the kind of information that spreads when people realize it might protect them from a costly mistake. A friend, a family member, a colleague, anyone who might be walking around right now assuming the old rules still apply. You could be doing them a real service simply by making sure they see this. The first thing you should understand is that knowledge itself is a form of protection. People who do not know about this ruling are walking around right now making decisions as if the old rules still apply exactly as they always have. They might be entering agreements with federal agencies, making arguments in administrative hearings, or simply going about their daily lives assuming their rights are fully protected in exactly the same way they were 6 months ago. But you now know that is not the case. And that knowledge gives you an advantage. It allows you to ask better questions, to demand clearer explanations, and to seek qualified help when something does not feel right. The second thing you should do is build a relationship with professionals who can help you navigate the areas where this ruling might affect you. If you are a business owner, that means having an attorney who understands administrative law and who can review contracts, licenses, and regulatory compliance issues with fresh eyes. If you receive government benefits or are involved in any kind of federal dispute, that means having someone who can advise you on the new landscape before you commit to any course of action. Do not wait until you have a problem to find these professionals. The best time to establish a relationship with a qualified attorney is before you need them. By the time you realize you are in trouble, you are already in a defensive position, and that is never as strong as being prepared from the start. Let me tell you something that I think is critically important to understand about the Supreme Court. When the court makes a ruling like this, it is not just resolving a single dispute. It is setting a precedent, which means it is establishing a principle that lower courts will follow in similar cases going forward. Precedent is the foundation of the common law system that America uses. What the Supreme Court decides today becomes the rule that judges apply tomorrow in cases that look like this one, even if they are about very different facts. That is why this ruling matters so much beyond its immediate context. The principle the court established, that executive authority in urgent situations deserves more deference than previously granted, will be cited in cases involving environmental regulations, healthcare policy, immigration enforcement, financial oversight, and virtually every other area where the federal government acts. Every single one of those areas just got slightly more complicated for the people caught up in them. And the people who understand that will be better positioned to protect themselves than the people who do not. I want to emphasize something here. None of this is meant to scare you. It is meant to empower you. Fear without information leads to paralysis. But information with action leads to control. And control is what you want when you are dealing with something as important as your legal rights, your business, your family, and your future. You cannot control what the Supreme Court does. You cannot control what the executive branch decides to do. But you can control how prepared you are to respond intelligently when those decisions affect your life. On May 14, 2025, the United States Supreme Court issued an emergency ruling by a 6-3 vote that shifted the legal balance regarding executive authority and judicial deference in urgent situations. This ruling affects how federal agencies can act, how quickly they can act, and how much power courts will give to those actions when they are challenged. The implications reach into immigration, business regulation, benefits administration, property rights, and virtually every other area where the federal government has power over individual Americans. The ruling is not unanimous, which means serious legal disagreement remains about whether this was the right decision. The dissent was strong and public. The majority was clear and binding. Both perspectives deserve to be understood, and you should seek to understand them rather than accepting the version that confirms what you already believed. The practical stakes are real. People who do not know about this ruling are operating under assumptions that may no longer be accurate. People who do know about it have an opportunity to adjust their approach, seek qualified advice, and prepare for situations that might otherwise catch them off guard. This is not the end of the story. It is a new chapter, and that chapter is still being written. Your choice is simple. You can be part of the group that understands what is happening, or you can be part of the group that finds out too late that the rules changed underneath them. I have laid out the facts, the context, the implications, and the practical steps you can take. The rest is up to you. But I will tell you this with complete confidence. The people who take this information seriously and act on it intelligently will be better positioned than the people who dismiss it or forget about it within a day or two. If you found value in what I shared here today, please share this video with someone you care about. A friend, a family member, a colleague, anyone who might benefit from understanding this ruling and what it means. That is how information spreads. That is how people protect each other. And that is how we build a society where ordinary citizens are not left vulnerable simply because they did not know something important that they deserve to know. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay alert, and remember that knowledge is always your most powerful tool when it comes to protecting what matters most.